Am I picking up on something real, or am I just overthinking this? This is a question sensitive people ask themselves every day. In everyday conversations, you've probably heard people say things like, "You're too sensitive," or "Stop reading into things so much." But this isn't just an emotional issue. Looked at through the lens of cognitive psychology, this comes down to the difference between two separate processes: receiving a signal and interpreting a signal. And these two processes happen only seconds apart. If you have a sensitive nervous system, you're probably familiar with this loop. You notice a very small signal, someone replies a little slower than usual, their tone shifts slightly, their eyes seem unsteady, or an answer feels somehow off. Then, within seconds, your mind builds a complete story: they're hiding something, they don't care anymore, or something's wrong. And you end up exhausted. Other people might call you paranoid. But the real issue isn't whether you're sensitive or not. The real issue is that you haven't yet learned to separate two things. Which part is the actual signal? And which part is the story your mind created on top of it? This video will help you pull those two things apart, understand why your brain does this, and show you how to stop getting pulled into the cycle of overthinking. Many people assume being sensitive means being fragile or weak. But according to some research on the trait known as the highly sensitive person, a concept introduced by psychologist Elaine Aron, the nervous system of a sensitive person functions somewhat like a high-sensitivity radar. They have a lower response threshold, meaning they pick up on small changes that others simply miss. Because their brain isn't necessarily processing a heavier load of information at that exact moment, they can become nervous more easily, their breathing shifts, and they often pause for a few extra seconds before responding, just to gather their thoughts. In practice, this means you notice details that others overlook, and you react faster to small shifts in someone's tone, expression, or behavior. A simple way to put it: your brain works like a radar with a higher resolution than average. It picks up more data in the same moment. For example, where someone else sees nothing unusual, you notice something feels a little different. But here's a more important truth: picking up a signal and correctly interpreting that signal are two completely different skills. A good radar only means you're collecting better data. It doesn't guarantee you're reading that data correctly. And this is exactly where the problem begins. Intuition isn't a supernatural ability. In cognitive psychology, intuition can be understood simply as the brain processing information very quickly, based on experience it has already stored. It happens automatically, almost without conscious thought. Genuine intuition tends to have three characteristics. It arrives quickly and briefly, more like a sensory signal than a story. For example, something feels off. A slight discomfort. A sense that something is slightly out of place. It doesn't come with a specific conclusion. It doesn't say, "This person is lying to me," or "This person is bad." It stops at, "There's an unusual signal here." It isn't built on a long narrative. It doesn't drag in old memories or complicated assumptions. Intuition is raw signal, almost purely biological. A slightly faster heartbeat. A tightening in the throat. A mild knot in the stomach. It has no words yet. It has no plot yet. Assumption building kicks in very quickly after that initial intuitive signal. When the brain receives an unclear cue, it enters a state that dislikes ambiguity. Psychologically speaking, the brain tends to prioritize having an answer over not knowing. So it does one thing: it automatically generates an explanation. For example, someone replies with "okay" instead of the usual emoji. The brain might automatically produce, "They're being cold," or "They don't like me anymore." Then another mechanism kicks in, confirmation bias. At this point, the brain starts to dig up negative memories. Recall past moments when that person seemed off. And ignore any evidence that points the other way. The result, a small signal turns into a large story. And that story comes with very real emotions attached. This is why so many people feel drained from overthinking, not because of what actually happened, but because the brain keeps building and maintaining a script that may not even be true. For people with a sensitive nervous system, since their radar already picks up stronger signals than average, once they enter the assumption building phase, their brain has to process an overwhelming amount of information, and it gets overloaded. This is exactly why you might frequently experience headaches, insomnia, and mental exhaustion. Not because you're weak, but because you're running your brain at full capacity, non-stop. So how do you free yourself from this exhausting trap? The solution is definitely not to turn off your sensitive radar. That's a genuine gift, a real advantage. What we need to do instead is block the stage where the brain starts writing the story. Here are some very simple ways to tame your brain. Note the signal without writing the story. The moment your intuition flags something as off, the only thing you need to do is name that feeling as objectively as possible. Tell yourself, "Okay, I just picked up on something unusual." And stop right there. Don't add any judgment. Don't jump to interpretations like, "They must be hiding something from me," or "They're starting to lose interest." Just treat it as raw, unprocessed information. This might feel counterintuitive, since, as we've established, the brain really dislikes ambiguity. But instead of forcing yourself to find an answer immediately, try boldly telling your brain, "There isn't enough evidence to draw a conclusion right now." Then place that piece of information into a mental drawer, labeled, "Wait and Observe." You're not ignoring it, you're simply storing it for later. Our biggest mistake is confronting someone too quickly, before we have enough solid evidence. When you confront someone too early, they become defensive. The conversation turns into a conflict, and you lose the ability to observe the truth any further. So the wiser choice, in this moment, is silence. This isn't the silence of someone weak or afraid, it's a deliberate, purposeful silence. Instead of confronting, go back to your normal behavior. And keep observing, is their behavior consistent? Does it repeat? Is this a one-off, or a pattern? Time is always the most honest filter. If someone truly has something to hide, the cracks in their behavior will surface naturally over time, without you needing to spend any energy interrogating or arguing about it right now. Once this process becomes second nature, some very specific changes tend to happen. Life for a sensitive person shifts into a completely new chapter, with 3 especially valuable changes. First, you reclaim a huge amount of energy that used to be wasted. Simply observing your surroundings doesn't tire you out. What actually drains you is constantly building images and writing stories in your head. Your brain just registers, it no longer constructs a narrative. Second, your ability to read people becomes more accurate. Once you're no longer driven by fear and assumptions, you start seeing things closer to what they actually are. You stop viewing people through the lens of fear. You begin to distinguish what's the real signal and what's simply your own emotional reaction. Finally, you build an incredibly solid boundary to protect your mind. You no longer feel pressured to clarify everything immediately. And you no longer obsessively try to resolve every unclear thing in your relationships. You allow incomplete information to simply exist. This makes you far calmer in your everyday interactions. Intuition or sensitivity has never been a bad thing, it truly is a gift, it's just that sometimes, we unintentionally let our brain jump straight from receiving a signal to concluding the whole story, skipping the pause that should sit in between. Separating intuition from assumption isn't about turning a sensitive person into someone cold or someone who lives in constant suspicion. It's about learning to use this sensitive gift the right way, gathering enough evidence before drawing a conclusion for yourself. Next time that strange feeling shows up again, take a deep breath and follow the order, simply acknowledge it. Smile and accept the uncertainty, and quietly observe. That is the peaceful boundary that protects the energy of a sensitive soul, so this gift stops being a burden and instead becomes a loyal companion. If you're also a sensitive soul on a journey to understand yourself better, hit follow on Soul Constellation. Together, we'll connect the sparkling stars within your soul. Thank you for being here with me today, and I'll see you in the next journey.